It's several hundred miles from the sea and the closest approach. It's got mountains over 7,000 meters, over 20,000 feet high in one corner. It's got a very difficult topography. It's peopled by various tribal groups. It's had a centuries-long tradition of defying invasion and fighting against invaders. It defeated the British twice in the 19th century. It turned back the Russian invasion in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And so it resists foreign encroachments, and it's just a terribly difficult piece of ground and difficult people. But that's not the objective. The objective is international terrorists. Afghanistan is of interest only because we know that the Taliban government in Afghanistan has, to one degree or another, provided support and cover and deniability for Osama bin Laden's network of training camps and perhaps his operational headquarters.
Well, that's not a small matter, though.
It's a very large matter.
Right.
It's a very large matter, but we'd still like to get the terrorist network first. Remember that this is a group that plans operations, and there's probably other operations in plan against us today that we don't know about. The work we're doing to roll up these cells, the pursuit of this activity that occurred against us and the terrorists that we've identified so far in the United States is vital. But we don't know that there aren't other sleeper cells associated with other prospective actions. And so it's vital to take our homeland defense responsibilities very, very seriously. So we don't want to get distracted from that by a months-long foray into very, very difficult terrain. We got to do everything, keep a lot of different balls in the air at once on this operation.
General Clark, I can feel you pushing me away from this line of questioning. As a former enlisted guy, I got to tell you, I'm enjoying a bit pushing a general back a little bit. Yeah. One more question then on this line.
Let me tell you why I want to push a little, if I could,
okay,
Aaron, on this. Because it's a natural thing. America's angry, and people want to strike back at this in the sense of visible, forceful action right away. But we have to depend on our leadership to tell us whether that's the right thing to do and whether it's the wise thing to do. And what we don't want to do is we don't want a public outcry and building expectations that there's some easy, simple military solution that a few cruise missiles or a big 6-month buildup is going to resolve, because this is a much different type of problem. So that's why I'm pushing back a little bit to try to get the full dimensions of the problem in play. And there may well be a place for military action, but it's not the primary thing we're interested in right now.
General, I learned 30 years ago the guy with the scrambled eggs is always right. I'll stop here while I haven't been court-martialed. And I know I'll have other opportunities to try this again. Thank you. It's good to talk to you. Wes Clark, former NATO commander, joins us tonight. You know, you can't resist sometimes those 30 years. Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon. A couple of things from Jamie tonight. We saw some it's devastating, I think it's a fair word, pictures of the Pentagon, a look at the Pentagon we hadn't seen before, and he could tell us more about that, and we'll talk about some of the call-ups too. Jamie, it's been a long day for you as well. Good evening.
Good evening, Aaron. What would you like to start with?
Let's start with the pictures.
Well, first of all, the Pentagon released a couple of new pictures of the Pentagon today. First of all, they released some new video that was shot on the day that the attack took place, showing the devastation outside as the facade of the Pentagon collapsed. Now, this happened somewhere about 45 minutes after the plane hit, and what personnel told us here today was what the amazing thing was that the building held as long as it did, and they credit that to reinforced steel that had been put in as part of the renovation campaign. They say that gave some of the people in that section the enough time to get out and save themselves before the building actually collapsed. So they credit some of the procedures and some of the new building techniques they used in the renovation as saving some lives there. The Pentagon also released some video today inside showing the devastation and the damage in there, and that was quite remarkable as well. You could see the desks where people had been doing their work in that wing of the Pentagon. No clue that a fully loaded, fully fueled jetliner was about to crash into them. You could In this part of the Pentagon, you could still smell some of the jet fuel even days after the fire took place. And it's remarkable to look at some of the windows that were there that had special blast-resistant glass that were able to also mitigate the effects of the explosion. The death toll now stands at 124. It's been lowered twice because it turned out that 2 people who were counted were actually on some of the airliners that were hijacked, DOD employees who were actually on the planes. But they say the death toll would have been much higher had it not been for some of those security precautions.
Jamie, hold the thought for a second, okay? I want to come back to you. Don't leave us, and we'll come back to you and to the pictures. We've just picked up a couple of pieces of information we want to get to you as quickly as we can. Number one, we talked about a material witness the government was looking for right at the top of the program. We've now learned that this would be the second material witness to be taken into custody, has in fact been taken into custody here in New York. And we are also told that the FBI and police agencies are searching now an apartment in Jersey City just across the river and questioning 2 other people. That's going on now, or at least was going on a few moments ago. So this sense of an investigation in motion and making progress, whether you see it as quick progress or creeping progress nevertheless continues here on Saturday night. Jamie, it is difficult, I know, to be interrupted in mid-thought and mid-picture. I apologize, but here we go again.
Well, let me just mention a couple of other things. The Pentagon did say today that they were going to rebuild this section of the Pentagon as quickly as possible, although they say it'll take a couple of years and cost well over $100 million, probably hundreds of millions of dollars by the time they get through. And it's important for the Pentagon officials say for one reason to show that the Pentagon, which is the symbol of the arsenal of democracy, is going to be put back together. Also, another little important part of symbolism tonight from the Pentagon, we learned tonight that the operation that includes the combat planes flying over the United States, ships at sea along the coastlines, and the U.S. military support for the disaster relief both in New York and Washington has now been given the name Operation Noble Eagle. At this point, that just refers to what the military is doing now in response to the attacks. It doesn't extend to any offensive operation. When that time comes, it may get another name, or this name may be broadened. But again, the Pentagon puts a lot of thought into picking these names to try to communicate what it is they're trying to accomplish. And in this case, with a mission of homeland defense and aid to the homeland, they picked the name Operation Noble Eagle.
And on the reservist question, are the notifications going out? Are men and women getting phone calls or messages, however they do this, that it's time to report?
They are getting notifications as they're beginning to just start to identify units. Most of the notifications have not gone out as they're trying to figure out which units are the most appropriate and whether there are people, units that want to volunteer, or people within those units that want to volunteer. Already, though, some Coast Guard people have been activated in order to increase patrols along the coastline, and some reservists are beginning to get those activations. But the Pentagon stresses that at this point, all of those reservists being called to active duty are to support these 2 missions, either homeland defense or support the civil authorities. There's been no call-up of reservists yet for any offensive military operations.
Jamie, thanks. Jamie McIntyre at the Pentagon for us, giving us a very good look at a very bad scene that went on there on Tuesday. On the subject of a very good look, I'll give you a very good look at the city of New York as it was. We just went to the file today and took some pictures of New York as it was the other day. That would be Monday or so. I'm not sure when these pictures were taken, but that's certainly how the city looked. Those 2 buildings, of course, are those 2 buildings in the center of the Trade Center, the towers of the World Trade Center. As you peer around, it's coming around New York Harbor, and there are the centers, 50,000 people, as you know by now, about where one of those planes hit, right about there as you zoom into the offices, the Statue of Liberty. I stand on this roof a lot when I come to work, and I look out there, and I don't know that I ever really saw the Statue of Liberty, and now I come up here every day, and it's almost the first thing I see when I look out in the harbor during the day. It's a little hard to see at night. Now, today, as we come in, just this watch, the towers are gone. And the smoke is there, and it is still there tonight, and apparently will be there for some time to come. The landscape of the city, in many ways, literally changed. The Trade Center buildings are in the district of Jerrold Nadler. Congressman Nadler is with us to talk a little bit. It's nice to see you. Look out there for a second. What do you see when you look at it? I don't mean literally, I suppose, what do you see, but what do you see?
It's unspeakable. It's unspeakable. I came up here from Washington on Tuesday and came up here by train, and normally the first thing you can see of New York, 20 miles away, is the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, and instead all you saw was a void and a huge column of smoke coming up from where it should have been and going out across the Jersey Shore to the south. And it was a gut-wrenching thing. I just felt violated.
Yeah.
My city was violated.
And that feeling, I suspect, hasn't changed much over the days. It shifts a little bit, but
Has not changed. It's still terrible to look at pictures of the way New York looked and the way it looks now. It's a grievous, grievous wound.
you were down there yesterday with the president. I saw you. When you saw it, worse than you imagined, bigger than you imagined?
Well, I had been there on Wednesday also with the mayor extensively. I can't say it's bigger or smaller. It's just awesome to look at. It's just awesome to look at the site, to look at a mound that's maybe 40 feet high and was a 55-story building, the 7 World Trade Center. To look at the wreckage, at the bridges across West Street that led to the World Financial Center. One of them is completely down. The other's pretty intact but hanging, attached to nothing. And looking at those two voids where those two towers were, and thinking of all the people who lie buried in that mound of rubble. It's awesome.
Just a couple of sort of odds and end questions. I'm not sure where all this goes. The mayor. You and the mayor are of different parties. You haven't always seen eye to eye. How do you think he's done?
He's done magnificently. I was with him much of the day on Wednesday. I sat in on the operations meeting. He called it a briefing, but it was really an operations and planning meeting where it was the mayor and his commissioners. The governor was there and a couple of people. And I think I was the only person there just watching. And I was awed by the professionalism and the very matter-of-fact way he made the decisions. And I hate to say it, but this is his forte. Crisis is his forte. He's a very good crisis person, and he's done great in holding the city together and in voicing.
Yeah, it's really both elements of that, isn't it? It is literal crisis management, but the guy has been everywhere. He's been accessible. He's been smart in a lot of ways.
There's no question about that.
I mean, whatever your politics, it's really
forget
not
the politics;
issue.
it's irrelevant. He's been fine, more than fine. He's been very, very good at this.
It seems to me that politicians and perhaps journalists too, in times like this, say the expected things. And we've heard the expected things a lot. The city will rebuild, we'll be fine, we'll hang together, all of that. We're a country, I think, of short memories. Do you worry that the nation's attention at some point, not too far away, will turn to something else? There'll be another crisis, another moment.
Well, life goes on, and yes, things do change and people go on. But we will rebuild and so forth. But the fact is, we'll rebuild minus the somewhere between 4,000 and 20,000 people who are dead. And those families and their loved ones are shattered. I know some of those families myself, and they're not going to rebuild. I mean, the children will grow up and have children of their own, but there'll be a void. There'll be a terrible, terrible void. And there's no getting around that, obviously. And we have been awakened. I mean, when I saw that, I was in Washington. And I was about to go to my office at 5 to 9 in the morning when I turned on the TV, saw the World Trade Center burning, heard about a plane, thought immediately of the 1945 collision of an Army bomber into the Empire State Building. And then as I was watching, the second plane came in and hit the second tower, and I said, oh my God, it's a terrorist attack. Yeah. And then I immediately thought, thank God these people didn't have access to nuclear materials. Because that's the next problem that we're going to have, and that's a problem that we're ignoring right now. I mean, there's an article on the front page of the New York Times a few weeks ago that because of the expense the United States was going to or is going to abandon a program